Auschwitz-Birkenau, former German Nazi concentration and extermination camp. The largest cemetery final resting place in the world. Over 1 million Jews, over 100,000 of Poles, Sinti and Roma, and Soviet prisoners of war. This is not an ordinary museum. Also because no other place saves items such as a broken-off toothbrush or an old suitcase. One of the most modern conservation workshops in the world operates in the former outbuildings of the camp. The remains of the death factory. Priceless and cherished evidence of the crime. Often the last sole remain traces of their owners' lives. "905 cans of deadly gas, Zyklon B, have been preserved till today. Conservators spent 3 to 7 days on each one, but neither time nor costs matter, because it is one of the most important pieces of evidence of unimaginable crimes. Let's hear the accounts of prisoners forced to work in the gas chambers.
We happened to find people whose eyes were popping out because of the last-ditch effort their fighting body was able to make. Others were bleeding from all openings in their bodies. The action of the gas and fear caused their entire intestinal contents to be expelled. Some bodies were red, others very pale. However, all were suffering a lot.
The inventor of the insecticide called Zyklon B was the German chemist Fritz Faber, a 1918 Nobel Prize winner. This preparation was already used during World War I for delousing of, for example, uniforms and underwear of German soldiers returning from the front. The purchase costs were relatively low and amounted to around 5 marks per kilogram of the preparation. Hydrogen cyanide, a cheap and effective agent to exterminate bugs, insects, and rats, was used by Germans to murder Jews. The victims driven to the gas chambers were lied to that they were going to bathe after their journey.
In most cases, whole families were walking. Their parents were holding their children's hands, taking along everything they needed to have a bath.
Here is one of the 3 artificial showers from Auschwitz that have survived to this day. Let's listen to the accounts of prisoners forced to work in the gas chambers.
On the ceiling inside the gas chamber were fitted showers, which of course were not connected to the water supply system.
The gas chamber in crematory number 3 was placed underground. At the ceiling, there were dummy showers, one next to the other. There were plenty of them all over the ceiling.
A special knife with a few teeth on the edge was used for opening cans, and this knife was put against the lid, next hit with the hammer to open it. And then the contents of the can were poured into the gas chamber.
This is the original Zyklon B drop box. The damper was securely tightened with screws to prevent gas leaks. Let's listen to the accounts of prisoners forced to work in the gas chambers.
As soon as Cyclone B came into contact with the air, the released gas spread first at floor level and then rose up to the ceiling. The lowest layers of bodies were always the corpses of children, the elderly and weak people, whereas the biggest and the strongest bodies used to lie atop. Those lying on the top must have climbed on the bodies of those already resting on the floor. Bleeding corpses, scratched. Some had tufts of torn-out hair in their hands. Pregnant women died while giving birth to their babies. Or often they would give birth to them before they died. There is no way to describe such scenes.
The Germans intended for the extermination to be total. Murdering all of the European Jews was not the only objective. It was also to erase all traces of the victims' lives and deaths. The struggle to restore their names, surnames, and faces is still going on. That's why every item that belonged to the victims is treated like a priceless relic. Sometimes even a tiny trace left by the victim after long and extensive research procedures allows to discover the history, as if a murdered child suddenly appeared in front of us and told us its story.
A booty, until recently quite an anonymous object, was among thousands of shoes at the museum's core exhibition. While working on securing the objects in the display cases, we came across these booties with a handmade inscription.
Inside the shoe, there was a name and surname, Amos Steinberg, and also the number 541. But it was not a camp prisoner number. Anyway, it did not lead to Auschwitz, but to a completely different place. It is August 10th, 1942. Another Jewish transport from Prague ends up in the Theresienstadt ghetto in German-occupied Bohemia. 4-year-old Amos Steinberg and his parents are on the deportees list. Inside the shoe, it was probably the caring mother who wrote down the boy's transport number 541. In Theresienstadt, now known by its Czech name of Terezin, despite hunger and diseases, the family managed to survive for 2 years. But the worst was yet to come. In the autumn of 1944, the boy's father Ludwig was the first to be sent to Auschwitz. Two weeks later, Amos and his mother Ida arrived in Auschwitz in a cattle car.
Rampa dla dzieci przybyłych do Auschwitz.
For the children who came to Auschwitz, the ramp must have been a terrifying place. Unknown sounds, unknown images, German orders, barking dogs, strong lights, and barbed wire all around could frighten the children. An additional element was the crowding. People getting off the carriages did it in a hurry. They were taking out their luggage. In this crowd, it was very easy for children to lose their parents. We can suspect that Amos's mother also tried to hold her son close to her when getting off the train, hold him by the hand or in an embrace, so that he would not get lost among the crowd of strangers. He would not disappear from her sight. surely they both dreamed of meeting their father and husband again. They underwent selection and waited to bathe after the journey. Ida was a young, healthy, strong woman. She could hope to survive, but she didn't know one thing. The Germans, at the cost of the efficient course of the mass extermination, decided to send mothers and children to their deaths. Perhaps their experience in the Holocaust process, or perhaps simply the SS men's knowledge, was telling them that mothers should not be separated from their children, that attempts to take the child away could end in protest and strong opposition. Even if the woman seemed strong, capable of hard work, if she had a small child in her arms, she was led with her child to the gas chamber. We don't know what the last moments of Amos and his mother's lives might have been like. However, the testimonies of Sonderkommando prisoners help here again. They recall that mothers most often looked after these children with tenderness. They hugged them to calm their anxiety, to somehow make them comfortable. They helped them undress, arrange their clothes in piles so that they could find these clothes after the supposed disinfection or bathing. So they did everything that thousands of mothers on Earth do every day. Perhaps Amos's mother folded his clothes into a pile or hung them on a hanger, trying to remember its number. Perhaps she tied the shoes together by their laces so that neither would get lost, and it would be easier to find both of them after disinfection. But this is not the end of the story of the shoe with the number 541.
The museum published information about the discovery, and soon we were contacted by the boy's stepsister living in Israel. Thanks to her courtesy, our knowledge about the history of Amos's family was enriched with valuable information, unavailable in any other archives, as well as some photographs of the boy and his parents.
It turned out that Ludwig Steinberg was only in Auschwitz-Birkenau for 2 weeks. He was transferred to the Dachau camp, survived the war, remarried, and emigrated to Israel. There, he changed his name to Yehuda Shinen. In 1955, he gave a testimony at the Yad Vashem Institute, certifying Amos and Ida as Holocaust victims. Meanwhile, decades later, the shoe with the number 541 led researchers to another amazing discovery.
We continued further research in the museum collection, and we found that the suitcase with the inscription Ludwig Steinberg, kept in our collection, might be linked to Amos's family. However, we also knew that at least 2 prisoners in the Auschwitz camp had the same name and surname.
Who was the owner of this suitcase? Impossible to establish with the naked eye, when none of the witnesses was alive. Until modern technology stepped in. Professor Tomasz Wojewski, a world-class specialist in the field of multispectral imaging, worked with the Auschwitz-Birkenau Museum.
The multispectral setup that I'm using consists of a multispectral camera, which is able to record images from ultraviolet through visible to infrared radiation. And then to the camera, a special optic is attached. And the third component, which is the crucial part of this setup, are multispectral lamps, which are able to project light at different wavelengths. The machine, the technique, allows us to see details which are not accessible to human vision.
the eye of the camera analyzed the surface of the suitcase. At first glance, it might seem there is nothing unusual there. But are you sure? Years later, the efforts paid off. The researchers discovered a secret hidden for nearly 80 years. In this photo, with the naked eye, you can see lines forming the number 5. It was hidden under the paint. This would not be possible without the use of this unique technology. Soon, the entire text was read. It is number 541, the same under which 4-year-old Amos was registered in the transport to the Theresienstadt ghetto. Probably at first it was a suitcase with his belongings, signed like the shoe by his caring mother. However, after 2 years, when his father left the ghetto in a transport to Auschwitz, he took the suitcase with him. His name, Ludwig Steinberg, was written on the lid, and the number 541 got blurred and disappeared. Until now, to tell the world the Steinberg family story.
Amos
and his mother Ida arrived in Auschwitz in early October 1944. At the beginning of November, a decision was made to stop the mass extermination of Jews in the gas chambers. When we think about Amos's story, it is impossible not to be aware that if he had come to the camp just a month later, he would have had a chance to survive. "80% of the Jews deported to Auschwitz were immediately murdered in the gas chambers. The rest were driven to a place where it was just real water pouring from the showers. But at the same time, the road through the camp hell was beginning. Let's listen to the memories of the Holocaust survivors.
I was taken to the bathhouse together with other people, where we had to strip ourselves. There they disinfected us, cut off the hair on our head and any other hairy places. Although in the ghetto, we had already been subject to gynecological examination. They also checked we weren't hiding any valuables in our vaginas.
The entire building was a part of, let's say, the industrial complex of Auschwitz. Victims were treated in that place as if they were on a conveyor belt. It was the building where people who had their own identity and their own problems became numbers.
The central sauna in Birkenau was put into operation at the end of 1943. The rooms form a logical sequence of the camp admission procedure, successive stages. First of all, one of the 2 largest rooms in this building. It is a hall that at the same time was both a waiting and undressing room. Very often, women had to undress in the presence of SS men. That was extremely hard and humiliating for them, and it caused a lot of embarrassment and shame. Especially that, as the female prisoners recall, in such situations, SS men often joked, teased these prisoners, and mocked them.
We had to walk past those SS men naked. They were looking at us on the front and back. They paid attention to our legs.
As soon as we went inside, they had stripped off. I felt numb again, as if my body didn't belong to me. Only a nightmare, isn't it? It will end when I open my eyes and I'll see my mom hugging me.
Then the naked male and female prisoners had to go to the room where the hairdressers were waiting. Prisoners recall that apart from having their heads shaved to the bare skin, all other areas of bodily hair were shaved as well. A prisoner was forced to stand on a stool. First, the private front areas were shaved. Then that prisoner had to turn around and bend over to facilitate the hairdresser's work.
They did it dispassionately, impulsively, disheartened, as if they were shaving objects, not people. Razor blades, or perhaps razors, I don't remember this. They were hellishly blunt and cut us. I'm embarrassed to say, but we did actually bleed.
In the next room, a detailed examination was carried out. But by no means was it about caring for the Auschwitz deportees. From the reports of female prisoners, we know that here in the sauna, there were personal inspections, personal searches to check whether the prisoners tried to smuggle in, hide any valuables, jewelry, and any natural body openings. But this brutal and degrading search had another terrifying purpose. In this room, the SS men carried out a kind of reselection. Pregnant women, for example, were often picked out here. Naked prisoners no longer had the opportunity to hide their condition, so such women were immediately directed from here to the gas chambers. The next room is the showers. A few of the deported have heard horrific stories about Auschwitz. They were convinced that they would be gassed.
Some women were extremely terrified as they were afraid of the gas. But it was actually a real bath. Something wonderful. It was a true paradise. Because after so many days of traveling, we were able to take a bath in the end. We started singing and shouting from happiness.
This is the only remaining photo of the central sauna showers. But the happiness of the deportees did not last long.
So that the disinfection should be complete, we had to be sprinkled with Lysol, a hellish disinfectant. Lysol applied on a wounded meant hell, pain, sheet all over the body. It's fire, blaze. All people were actually crying, yelling, and howling with pain.
After the bath, the prisoners went to the next room, the drying room. It often occurred that the prisoners were not given any towels. It was not uncommon that the windows in that room were simply open, and the prisoners had to dry themselves somehow, wait until they were dry. The last room in the sauna was the dressing room. Those who had just arrived at the camp received camp clothing, striped uniforms, or civilian clothing stolen from the property of Jews doomed to extermination. Often, male and female prisoners received completely mismatched clothes, too large or too small, inappropriate for the season, often damaged, stained, and dirty. But this is not the end of humiliation. The last step is tattooing prisoner numbers on their forearms, turning a person into a worthless string of numbers. Afa Moses Kor was 10 years old when she was sent to Auschwitz. She survived by a miracle because the SS doctor, Josef Mengele, chose her and her twin sister for pseudo-medical experiments. She was haunted by the traumatic experience of being tattooed.
As many as 4 people had to hold me. A man making tattoos heated a pen like a device over the flame. Then he dipped in ink, put the hot tip on my body, and started. A7063, number on the outside of my left forearm. Stop, it hurts.
They had to give up their pre-camp identity. They had to leave behind everything they knew from before camp life, with the awareness that from now on, you are no longer a human. You are no longer a doctor. You are no longer a sister, a mother. You are no longer a teacher. Now you are first and foremost a concentration camp prisoner, whose main duty is to obey orders and wait slowly for death. When the procedure of accepting and registering new prisoners was over, one question was constantly asked: where are my relatives? Mom, father, siblings, grandparents. Let's listen to the memories of the survivors.
Tell me, where are our parents? You don't know where the assessment took them? A boy I knew told me. Can't you see that chimney giving off so much smoke? Your mom is being roasted over there.
This is one of the telegrams, arrest warrants, sent after prisoners who dared to escape from the camp. In June 1942, however, no one suspected that in a few dozen years, the hunted August Kowalczyk would wear the SS uniform.
Ten pan musiał się pomylić.
Takie papierki możesz pokazywać żandarmom, a nie nam. A może nie wiesz, idiotko, że jesteś gestapo?
It's really amazing. The former Auschwitz prisoner became an actor after the war, and he played the roles of brutal Nazis. In addition, he said he had never had a problem with this. He simply tried to create the same feelings in the audience that the Germans evoke in him during his stay in the camp. But August Kowalczyk had an iron character, and from the very beginning.
He seriously considered entering a theological seminary. But after the outbreak of war, everything changed. He wanted to fight, to become a soldier, and that is why he tried to get to France, to join the Polish army under formation.
Unfortunately, he fell into the hands of the police when crossing the Slovak-Hungarian border illegally. In December 1940, he was sent to Auschwitz. He was given the number 6804. After 6 months, he found himself in one of the lowest circles of Camp Hell. he was sentenced to a penal company for life.
This is a special working group, the so-called Strafkompanie, penal company, to be assigned to especially hard work. The penal company prisoners were deprived of any rights. They were placed in a separate, closed barrack. It was well known that penal company members were sentenced to death.
Except that death in penal company was a slow torture. Starvation rations, constant beatings, and murderous work. In the former barracks of the penal company, a painting made by an anonymous prisoner has been preserved. It depicts the digging of the so-called Königsgraben, the royal ditch. This mocking name was given to a large channel draining water from the Birkenau camp. The prisoners dug a trench regardless of the weather, often waist deep in water. One by one, they died. This is how August Kowalczyk remembered the nightmare of the penal company.
The prisoner was completely exhausted and lying near a pile of turfs. SS-man Moll approached him and asked why was he not working. The prisoner turned out to be a Jew. He had the Star of David sewn on his clothes and was a dance instructor from Radom. Moll threw him into the nearby marsh. The Jew was sinking slowly. Moll was sneering at him by saying he would show him the dance of death and that it would be his last dance. Eventually, only the star remained afloat. As a symbol, it rested longest on the surface of the water.
The penal company had absolutely nothing to lose, but it had one advantage, one chance of survival. The prisoners often worked outside the camp, so they decided to attack SS-men to escape at a convenient time.
It was the greatest group escape in the history of the Auschwitz camp.
June 10th, 1942. Time, 4:30 p.m. Heavy rain. You can hear whistles signifying the end of work. August Kowalczyk bets everything on one card.
I was just about to jump unnoticed onto an SS man with a spade in my hand, but he jumped away in a trice as if he were moved by a spring with a gun in his hand. My colleagues who were to attack him on the sides didn't hold on and bolted. The SS man was following them. I got rid of my spade and headed for the thicket on the other side. Another guard opened fire 3 times at short range, but he missed. I jumped on the causeway. When I was jumping into the thicket, an SS man standing on the causeway fired short bursts from a machine gun. Fortunately, the bullets were dispersed on the leaves.
About 50 prisoners attacked the SS-men. Only 9 managed to escape. But the rebellion of the penal company had a terrible cost. In retaliation, the Germans murdered over 350 prisoners. Those few who managed to escape survived only because the local people helped them. People helped even though they knew that they would face terrible punishment, being sent to a camp.
After the war, he became a famous actor and director, but he never forgot Auschwitz and the heroic rebellion of the penal company.
Zwołanie sądu i wykonanie wyroku nie powinno zająć zbyt wiele czasu.
Tak jest.
Dziękuję. Jest pan wolny.
After having retired, he had his own mission. The mission was to speak about Auschwitz as many times as indicated by his number, with which he was registered, which is 6,804. He visited schools in Poland, Europe and Japan, so he arrived in various continents, and his mission was completed exactly 70 years after his escape. I am going to tell this in public for the first time. My last conversation with August was when he was lying in the hospice of Oświęcim. A hospice that he organized, and the hospice was also meant to be a memorial to those who then helped camp prisoners. I remember when I came, he woke up, looked at me and said, "Andrzej, your face is decent. But remember, you have to work for your face until your last days."
Falsch. Wrong. Richtig. Correct. Unloading of transport of prisoners. Wrong. Correct. Escorting a small prisoner squad. Wrong. Correct. Guarding prisoners in the open space. Wrong. Correct.
Bilderbuch, a pictorial guide for SS men on duty in concentration camps. A simple SS guard would not understand the complicated instructions. Hence the idea for the pictures.
Most SS garrison members were young people without secondary school nor university degrees. It is estimated that approximately 70% of those SS men had completed some grades of elementary school or primary school.
The drawings were made by the German prisoner Otto, who was reportedly convicted of money forgery. Another prisoner of French origin, Marcel, transferred these drawings to stone. Later, hundreds of prints were made from them to be used in other concentration camps.
The SS man had to understand one thing above all. The prisoner is not a human. He is a worm. His death is of no importance.
In one of the drawings, we see the moment when the SS man shoots one of the prisoners and the other is lying on the ground already dead. And underneath we can read the word richtig, which means right.
For shooting a prisoner during an escape attempt, the SS man received a prize: 3 days off or an extra bottle of vodka. In a moment, we will see some unique photos, the only ones showing the burning of the victims' bodies. This macabre work is performed by the Sonderkommando, a special work unit, mostly made up of young Jewish prisoners. Opposition is immediate death. Heinrich Mandelbaum was one of them. He was 22 years old.
When I saw 16-year-old girls as beautiful as Venus and men like Apollo, my heart used to beat like the Sigismundus bell. We put them apart under trees so that they should lie longer, and we dragged others to burn them in the pits nearby crematory number 5.
Members of the Sonderkommando often see their relatives and friends enter the gas chambers, or they have to burn their corpses. They are slaves in the death factory. Yet a few of them will change the course of the Auschwitz history. Zalman Leventhal, Alex Herrera, Yankiel Handelsman, and Zalman Gradowski, who led the resistance movement. People were fully aware that one day they would be of no use to the SS men and would be deprived of their lives. The Sonderkommando wanted to leave a trace of this tragic crime that took place here. In 1943, and certainly in 1944, they created written documents describing the most important events that took place in the crematoria. They described their mental state, described their pain, cry of despair. Risking their lives, they document the extermination. They bury invaluable accounts in the ground around the gas chambers and crematoria. In 1962, records hidden by Zalman Leventhal were found.
October 1944. The 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11 children, 12, 2,000 women, 2,000 family members, 3,000 women, 3,000 family members, 3,000 women, 800 children, 2,000 men, 800 men, gypsies, Slovakians, patients from the camp hospital.
In 1944, in just a dozen or so weeks, the Germans deport 430,000 Jews from Hungary. They murder entire families. A maximum of 4,000 people can be burned in the Birkenau crematoria per day. This is definitely not enough when overcrowded freight trains bring even several thousand Jews in one day. Therefore, the corpses have to be burned in open-air pits. The Sonderkommando prisoners want to show it to the world. They decide to take an extremely risky action. The idea is to record the Holocaust on photographic film. The naked women were captured in this square in front of Crematorium 5, where they were undressing in the open air, because in the undressing room it was not possible to accommodate the whole large transport. After taking off their clothes, the women go inside the gas chamber. In Birkenau, there are 4 gas chambers and crematoria numbered 2 to 5. Number 5 consisted of a room with furnaces, an undressing room, and rooms for murdering people. This photo was probably taken from the corner of this building behind the fence, possibly from inside one of the gas chambers. Unfortunately, here, opinions differ. We only know what you see in the photo, the square on my left side, the naked woman walking towards the gas chamber entrance. The tortuous death lasted up to 20 minutes. Then the bodies had to be burned. This sight would not leave Heinrich Mandelbaum for the rest of his life.
Hands, legs, and heads were the quickest to burn. We dragged the corpses into pits. Each of them had 80-centimeter chutes provided on both sides, where the human fat was accumulated. When the pit was filled in 3/4, we used pots and bowls to take it out and poured it on the corpses to accelerate their burning.
The next photos show the burning of the corpses. The covert photo was taken by a Greek Jew, Alex Herrera. As a man from the upper class of Greek society, he knew how to use a camera, and undoubtedly taking such photos, apart from the fact that it was very dangerous, also had technical limitations because the photos were taken from the dark interior of the gas chambers and the area that was being photographed was very bright. Alex Herrera hid behind the ajar chamber door. He was looking directly at the burning pits.
Thanks to members of the Polish resistance movement, photographic films were smuggled from behind the wires. They were sent to Krakow. There, they were developed and framed to make them more readable. But at the same time, the horror of the moment at which they were performed has disappeared. Only in the original frames, we can see that Alex was taking photos in a hurry, from hiding. We feel his fear, and at the same time, his determination and courage.
In the autumn of 1944, it becomes clear that the war will soon be over. Members of the Sonderkommando know that their fate is sealed, that the Germans will murder them as they are direct witnesses of the extermination. The Sonderkommando then holds about 660 prisoners. The camp is partially liquidated. More and more transports to camps in the interior of the Reich are leaving. The Holocaust is also slowly coming to an end. Prisoners from the Sonderkommando feel that this is the moment when the SS men will have to be finally resisted with armed resistance. The conspirators from the Sonderkommando establish contact with female prisoners working in the ammunition factory. They get gunpowder. They want to blow up the cremation furnaces and cause a rebellion throughout the camp. It is October 7th, 1944. The Sonderkommando rebellion breaks out. Desperate prisoners throw themselves at the SS men. A regular battle begins in the courtyard of Crematorium 4. In addition, 3 daredevils decide to risk their lives and blow up the doomsday device, 5 modern crematorium ovens in Crematorium 2. Meanwhile, about 80 prisoners rush to flee. They cut the barbed wire. 80 Sonderkommando prisoners headed south, probably because it is from here that, in good weather, Beskid Mountains are visible. The prisoners believe they will join the partisans in the mountains, that freedom is at hand. On the way, they kill 3 SS men. But more than a kilometer from the camp, they encounter an unexpected obstacle. Fish ponds. Moreover, the escaping prisoners are cut off by the SS emergency company. The Germans open fire on the fugitives, and almost all of them die. The total figure of the Sonderkommando rebellion is about 450 dead prisoners, 3 SS men bayoneted. Crematorium 4, to a large extent, burned down. Unfortunately, the attempt to destroy the furnaces in Crematorium 2 failed.
Kiedy Państwo patrzycie na zdjęcia wykonane przez Sonderkommando,
when you look at the photos taken by the Sonderkommando, you can see a moment when one of the Sonderkommando prisoners walks between the dead bodies.
Zwróćcie Państwo uwagę na tego człowieka.
Look at this man. He is treading carefully. It is clearly visible that he does not want to step on the murdered people.
Ja na tym zdjęciu widzę
I can see the great respect of the members of the Sonderkommando for the people whose lives were brutally taken from them.
Właśnie ten niepozorny gest.
This inconspicuous gesture says so much.